Are we all in? They actually came, which is good. Welcome.
Thank you.
And welcome also to the Barn Theatre Presents. This isn't a new idea. Just to sort of give you a bit of context, the first one of these was devised, some 5 years ago now, which in my lifetime is quite a long time ago. But it was fantastic. We devised it for the very development and the creation of this very room in which we're in tonight. So it's a real privilege to sort of, complete the circle of life really with, a dear friend and mentor of mine. So thank you for coming, and thank Phil for coming also. Phil he needs no introduction, but I will try my best. Phil's had a career spanning 4 decades. That's 40 years at the forefront of British film, TV, theatre and radio, both as an actor and a director. He's worked on many of our most loved TV titles and cult classics, and has worked with some fantastic names and fantastic people, so I'm sure we're going to get a real insight into those stories this evening. But because of that, we could not show all clips from your career this evening. We'll need
I gave him some DVD, a big pile of DVD.
We had a fortnight to go through them. Phil went to France. I'm sick to death of him. But yeah, so we couldn't show all the clips. We have got some fantastic clips which we'll really look forward to showing you. But before we crack on, we will show a short montage of some of Phil's best bits. So John, if you're up there and you're ready, we'll see some of your best bits, and then we'll crack on with what will be hopefully a fantastic evening.
Okay.
Thank you, Phil. Great. So we're done. Everyone can go home. That's my work done. We're in real acting royalty this evening. One thing which I didn't mention at the top is that Phil is obviously a very, very busy man, and we really must thank him for being here. Not only this morning was he in a voiceover session, but he is also in the middle of filming something for Sky Atlantic in Nice, in the Riviera.
It's a tough life, but someone's got to do it.
And he's come to bloody Welwyn, which is obviously very lovely. So, Phil, we really thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure.
And also, we'll start off with the beginning of your career, Phil, but you've worked with some fantastic people who also think very highly of you. Daniel Day-Lewis has put you in the same category as Robert De Niro, Meryl Streep and Marlon Brando as being one of his biggest influences, because obviously you worked with him at the very beginning of his career.
Yes, that was a big shock to me. I was filming Whitechapel and I came home and I'd left my phone at home. It was full. The answer phone was full, and all these people asking for quotes, and said that Daniel had quoted me as a major influence, along with Marlon Brando and Meryl Streep. And people were going, "Phil, who?" They couldn't believe it. I was a bit miffed that they were so surprised. But yes, I did work with Daniel. In 1983, we did a film, a remake of Mutiny on the Bounty in Tahiti. And we became friends, and I wrote a play called Skullduggery, which we'll talk about, I think, a bit later. And we did a rehearsed reading of it, and Daniel was in it. And Daniel was a big fan of a play I'd done in the theatre, and it was on TV as a play for today called Gotcha. And it had a real effect on him. And, actors of my generation and people of my generation, especially men, it spoke to them. So, but I was surprised, and very flattered, and that a double Oscar winner should name me as a major influence. And I was very, very made a fuss of for about a fortnight, and then everything went back to normal. Well, that's the way it is.
Let's start at the beginning, because obviously, you've had this great career. We're here now, 40 years on. It's about 47 years, I think you've been.
44.
Active.
It's 44th year.
So, where does Phil Davis come from? What is your background? Was it destined to be the kind of actor that you are now?
Absolutely not. No, I was brought up on a council estate in Essex. My dad worked in a factory, And my mum was a housewife and she worked in a hospital canteen. So we were an ordinary working class family. And I was born in 1953 and I went to a normal school and all that. And there was, people ask me, was there any theatricals in your family? I just laugh. I mean, because it seemed like a completely mad idea. But what was extraordinary for me was that I got it into my head that I wanted to be an actor before I left primary school, before I'd seen a play, before I knew what actors did. And I could read out loud, and there was that. And I liked the thing of getting up and everyone looking at me and all that. But, I felt a lot of the time like the kid who wants to play football for England, or be an astronaut or something. You get sort of humoured. But as I grew up and into my teens and started doing amateur dramatics and school plays and everything, it became an obsession. And I really don't know why or where it came from. I was just always more comfortable pretending to be someone else than pretending to be myself. It was a curious thing, and I found it sort of liberating and exciting. And also, if I'm honest, I didn't want to do what my dad did. I didn't want to go ride my bike to the factory every day and have a dull life. And so really, in some ways, to be an actor was a means of escape, a means to have an interesting life. But I was never concentrated on being famous or making lots of money or anything like that. I just wanted to do this thing that I loved doing, to do it for a living, to do it for a job. And so when I was growing up, I was thinking of, going out to repertory company, but they were beginning to sort of fade really by then.
And what was your path? Because a lot of people would go to drama schools, I guess, at that time. So what was your path?
Well, I didn't go to a drama school. I was in the National Youth Theatre, but I didn't really distinguish myself very much. I mean, I was unpromising material, to be honest. I was tiny and squeaky and a big Cockney accent and not handsome, not charming. I mean, everybody thought I was mad. No.
Oh, you're fine.
No. Don't. I wouldn't believe you. And I had the feeling inside of me that there was a space for me if I could get the opportunities, that I could make them work. And one of the things is when you do get the opportunities, you really have to grab them. You really have to make the best of them. You really have to not just give your best, but make the best of yourself. And that's one of the things I've learned over the years. You never stop learning or getting better. But no, in the National Youth Theatre, there were far more promising material than me. And I didn't really distinguish myself. But in my last year, I got a decent part in a play set in a ball store, and I played a kid called Horrocks, who everyone beat up and bullied. And he was very funny, and I made a decent fist of it. And then the National Youth Theatre was starting a professional company, and I'd left school by then, and I was hanging around in the coffee bar at the Shore Theatre where they were based, because I knew they were starting this professional company. And I went to Michael Croft and I said, "You're doing Romeo and Juliet. There's this little part of Peter, the Capulet servant. Can I play it?" And he said, "Let me think about it." And then he came back to me the next day and he said, "No." I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because we don't think you should take up a career as a professional actor. We don't think you have the range." And, of course, it was devastating. I was very upset. But there was a kind of steely determination. I thought, I will show you. And a couple of weeks later, I answered an advert in the Stage. And I went down to audition for Joan Littlewood at the Theatre Workshop, Stratford East, in 1972. And she gave me a job. It was meant to be just one play, but she liked me and kept me on for a year. And I'd found my place. I couldn't have been anywhere better. First of all, it was a real advantage not having been to drama school, because she worked in such an idiosyncratic way. I had nothing to unlearn. I had nothing to forget. I just threw myself into whatever she asked me to do. And, we were a sort of band of rogues and vagabonds down in Stratford East, and it was a wonderful company, and they welcomed me. And that was my start. And I couldn't have had a better one, really.
So many people talk about Joan Littlewood. Even myself, going in drama lessons now, she's seen as a sort of big practitioner in a way. But obviously to you, I mean, I guess at the end, you could have almost called her your friend. What was she like as a person, and what was she like as a director, and why do you think she was so important at the beginning of your career?
She was something of a genius. I mean, first of all, I've never known anyone in my life who was less concerned with success, less concerned with the greasy pole, and she never wanted her shows to transfer to the West End, even though it would have been financially an advantage. She wanted to keep her company together at Stratford East, and she was a proper artist. The thing is that once we'd rehearsed the plays and got them on, usually that's when it finishes. You play it every night and you do your best to keep a standard up. Joan, you were never finished. She would say, this scene's sort of dead now, let's make something else up. Or she'd say to an actor, you play that part tonight and you play that part. The panic on their faces, I'll never forget. I don't know it, Joan, we'll make it up, she'd say. And we were working at Stratford East. We did a play called The Londoners, which was a musical version of an earlier play called Sparrows Can't Sing, very funny play about the East End being redeveloped, with songs by Lionel Barr. And it was at the time of the 3-day week. You remember everyone was saying, you shouldn't use too much electricity. And she, without telling the company, she hired an actor to come in and pretend to be from the local council, put him in a brown overalls. And in the middle of the show, he suddenly strode through the auditorium saying, no, stop. You're using too many lights. You've got to turn them down a bit. And so there was this ad-libbed, this improvised thing. And she kept it up for a couple of weeks, and then it wasn't funny anymore, so she stopped it. And that's the kind of director she was. She kept you on your toes. There was one bit in the play where I owed money to someone. They came on and I ran away. And she'd bring him on from a different place every night. So I'd go, where is he? And suddenly he'd come on for someone else and he'd got me. So the whole thing was the production was a living thing. It was never set. It was always work in progress. And of course, for a kid like me, it taught me. Some of the times I didn't know what she was talking about, And one day you were a genius, the next day you were useless, and all that. And she was a bit fearsome, but she was sort of wonderful, and it touched everyone that ever worked with her. I mean, a lot of the actors that were there when I was there are a good bit older than me, and they're all very elderly now. And we meet every so often and reminisce about Joan, and the amount of affection in the room is just palpable. She touched us all, and she was magnificent. And they talk about Look Back in Anger being the play that sort of broke the mould of British theatre, but the things she was doing with Oh What a Lovely War and the Quare Fellow and all that, she really was a true original.
You've worked with a lot of teachers in your life, Joan being one of them, Mike Lee, we'll probably get on to talking about it a little bit later on. So you didn't really need that formal training. You got your foundations, which I guess is why you got your first big break at the Royal Court Theatre, not a long later.
Yes, well, I mean, at that time, the kind of things they taught you at drama school were not the kind of things that were useful at the Royal Court, and it wasn't necessary to speak RP. It wasn't necessary to have great deportment or a beautiful voice, And it never has been, thank goodness, in my career. The kind of acting I always loved was when you can't see the joins. When the actor does his best or her best to embed themselves in the character, to become the character. Like an artist painting a picture. They're sort of trying to get to the essence of the person, and that's what actors trying to do, but to embody them instead of paint them. And that was the kind of acting that was useful at the Royal Court. And I did 4 or 5 productions of varying quality at that time in the late 70s and early 80s. But it was a wonderful time.
I guess the one which you hold most dear would be Barry's Gotcha.
Yes.
Because obviously it was your, as you say, one of your first appearances at the Royal Court, but then also got you onto the BBC.
Yes. Well, originally, Gotcha was in a tiny little theatre called the Soho Poly, which is about the size of this room, held about 65 people down a basement just behind Broadcasting House. And I'd been sent this play, and it was unusual, first of all, to be sent the whole play. Normally, I just sent you a few pages for your little bit. And there was this story of a kid on his last day at school who takes a motorbike in as a sort of gesture of defiance, and no one notices. So he stashes it in the science lab, and when he goes to collect it at the end of the day, he disturbs 2 teachers in a sexual encounter. And he makes a lewd remark and gets a smack across the face. And he lights a cigarette and holds it over the petrol tank of the motorbike. And if it goes up, the whole room goes up because it's full of chemicals. And we have a hostage situation. And it was at the time of the great education debate, you know, when schools were turning into comprehensive schools, and it was going to be a kind of new start. And there was this kid who'd come through the education system, and he had a report. No, the teachers didn't even know his name. He had a report saying useless, you know, I've achieved little here, and it's this sort of dead-end blank generation. And the kid, it was like a kind of primal scream of rage at the opportunities he hadn't been afforded and the way the education system had let him down. An inarticulate kid, but kind of speaking in tongues, really. And it was a wonderful part, a very emotional part, slab of red emotion. And for me, I went down, I remember auditioning, and I thought, I'm going to claim this. I knew it was important, and I knew it was important for me to get it. And I slipped into his shoes really easily. I mean, I knew about those kids. I saw them at my school, you know, no gang pull, but no status, easily bullied. And I felt for him. He touched me. And I was able to reach the right emotional pitch to play it. And we did it at the Royal Court, we did it at Soho Poly, and then at the Royal Court we did a tour, and then it was done as a play for today on the TV in 1977. And it changed my life. It sort of launched my career. And I didn't know whether I'd be a star, but I knew I'd work. And that was all I was asking, really.
One thing which we have actually personally haven't touched on about Gotcha, which actually triggered me just as we were talking about Joan. I guess Joan gave you a sense of maturity as an actor. So when you go in for a play like Gotcha, where you're the only young man and you're with 3 essentially adult actors,
yes,
you're ready for that.
I think what Joan taught me was a sort of pragmatism, because a lot of the time I didn't quite understand what she wanted or what she was what she was aiming for. But I wasn't scared. You know, if she said stand on the building and jump, I'd have jumped. And so I wasn't ever worried about stretching myself. I wasn't ever worried about something being slightly outside my range, you know. I would go for it. And it was a wonderful gift she gave me, really. And, you know, the other interesting and unique thing about Gotcha was kids like that, parts like that, are not usually at the centre of the drama. They're usually peripheral, you know. It's usually about the teachers talking about the kid, but the kid was right in the centre of it. And it was a wonderful opportunity. And, you know, and it started my life, really.
It also kicked on. You didn't move out the realms of young schoolboy, you know, for much longer. You went straight into what is now the cult classic of Quadrophenia.
Yes.
How much fun was it? If you could just give our audience who might not have watched it just a little bit of a background into what Quadrophenia is about and the legacy it's had since.
Well, you know, it's a film about the mods and rockers. You remember the mods, some of you remember the mods and rockers. Beating each other up down in Brighton and all that. But essentially it was a story of a sort of alienated kid that Phil Daniels played the leading role. He's not the smartest kid and he's not the best looking and he can't get the girl he really loves. And I think it sort of spoke to adolescent girls. And what's interesting about Quadrophenia was, you know, when we made it and it was great fun and it was The Who, and so it was you know, the film everyone wanted to be in. But at the time it came out, it didn't make a huge splash. You know, it was moderately successful, but it didn't make film stars of anybody. And we all went back to our day jobs working in the theatre. And then, like 5 years after it came out, people were still talking about it and watching it on tape, you know, on VHS. And then 10 years, and then 15 years, and then 20 years. And now, you know, it's 40 years ago or something. And they're still having screenings of it. And it's still touching people and making them laugh and making them excited. And so it turned very gradually over the years into a cult movie. But it didn't feel like that when it first came out.
Well, let's try and grab a clip of it, John. We're going to go for a clip of Quadrophenia. This is Phil playing a young man called Chalky, and Phil Daniels playing Jimmy. and they're going to break in. Well, they've broken into a drugstore to hopefully steal some pills before a big day out and night out in Brighton.
I don't have to look, I know it off by heart.
What's it like, though, looking back at you back then?
It's weird, you know, it's like someone else. In fact, when we were going through the clips, you and I, in my house, and we played a clip of Gotcha, tears came to my eyes. It was, I know it's strange, it's like someone else, really. But I'm an emotional man, and but I don't get emotional about Quadrophenia, but about Gotcha I did. But I don't know what to make of it. I look at it sometimes and I think to myself, oh, Phil, you should have done this, and I wish you'd be stiller. I was always moving, constant motion. The cameraman used to say, Phil, you're coming out of shot again, sorry. I was hyperactive.
And what was it like, you know, being part of a film like that? Because, you know, let's not, you know, beat around the bush. There's a lot of young women on that set, a lot of young men. You know, the energy must have been massive.
It was, yeah. And we started the film with doing the big riot scenes in Brighton. So we were all away from home, staying in hotels. I don't think I went to bed for about a fortnight. And we were being very silly at nights and going out and having a lot of fun and burning off a huge amount of energy. But what it did is that the gang of friends that we were playing, we became a gang of friends. You know, we went out together to nightclubs and we went out to this and that, and we nurtured the same sort of relationships in real life that we had on screen, and that was a real help, I think, and one of the reasons why the film has lasted so long. But it was just enormous fun, and it's kind of strange looking at it now. And people say, you know, my son has never seen it. And his mum said to me, you can't show him that. It's drug taking, there's sex, just breaking into chemist shops. I said, he'll love it. She said, no. But he's 19 now. Maybe when he comes back from America, I'll show it to him.
Probably seen it.
Yeah, probably seen it, yeah.
I mean, you're known for, you know, the reason why you've had such a long and successful career is due, I guess, to your versatility in the whole range of roles. The next clip we'll show is actually, you know, we've jumped forward a couple of years, but it's from the TV series Bleak House, which is a Charles Dickens adaptation. So if we go from sort of cute, innocent Phil, we are not there anymore. So John, we'll play this clip now. We'll hopefully, Phil, speak a little bit more about the kind of characters and the kind of roles which you've had up to this date. That's him!
Brilliant. I love that one.
Yeah.
Well, it's a gift, isn't it? I mean, you know. I got sent these scripts, a big pile of scripts by the wonderful Andrew Davis. I'd never read the book. So I'm having a look in a small, and this character, this vivid character, comes bouncing off the page, and you know, you can't make a mess of that. And then I went back to the book, and got the measure of him, and he's there. You know, it was just a matter of doing him. And some people said you got to be careful with Dickens. You know, you can be a bit too marvellous with Dickens. But you know. You mustn't be afraid of going over the top with a character like that. But, you know, seriously, this is a man who's disabled. You know, he can't walk. And so he's very vulnerable. And this is in Victorian London, you know. And he's a moneylender. He's going to have a lot of enemies. And so he's really in a very vulnerable position. You know, he'd be easy to vanquish. And so the ferocity of the man was a kind of shield. You know, if he could scare you, then he was safe. And so that's what motivated the behaviour of Smallweed. And so it was sort of rooted in a need and not just an affectation. And so that was important.
I think, you know, I guess I have an appreciation of something like that in my small time with acting, that especially doing a character like that on TV, you need a lot of guts. You know, we talked about the maturity you said with Joan earlier, but one of your other big influences, I guess, was Mike Leigh. And when we first, were looking through these clips, unfortunately, we could have had the whole canon of Mike Leigh films up here this evening, but that's a different testimonial. But what was it like working with Mike? Who sort of, exposed you to different kinds of roles, exposed you to a different type of acting, which allowed you to go on to these kind of roles which we see you in today?
Well, when I first met Mike in the 70s, up until that time, with a few exceptions, but a lot of the time I was playing what I thought of as variations of myself. Jack the Lad this, or Boy from Gotcha, not so very different from me. And I don't know how many people know how Mike works, but he makes his films and his plays, and you start without a script and you invent this character, and the characters come together and there are improvisations and research, and then eventually he distills it down and organises it and makes it a script, and then he films it. So what you're doing with Mike is making someone up, in a way that a novelist might, or whatever. But you're doing a sort of serious investigation into somebody else's life. If someone's a plumber, then you go away and learn how to plumb. You find out where they were brought up, and you go there and you walk around and you smell it out. And suddenly, I thought, this is different to the work I've been doing before. This is a serious study of somebody else, and then trying to be them, trying to embody them. And of course you make all these decisions with your head, and then your feet won't do it, and your heart sort of tells you how to play it. And eventually you come up with someone who's sort of rooted in real life. You kind of know how to react in any given situation because of all the research and all the work you've done previously. So it's kind of anchored in something. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about Vera Drake. I know we're going to show
well, we can go to it now, yeah.
A clip of it in a minute. But, I was playing someone who was born at the turn of the century and who was orphaned. And he couldn't go into an orphanage like his younger brother because he was a year too old. And so this guy was out on his own. He was working around Islington Market, helping the fruit holders and the stall holders and all that, scraping a living and living in lodging houses. And he was a kid, he was 13 years old. And so one went down to the Metropolitan Archive and found out what would actually happen to a young man like that. And then he got a job working as a driver for a furniture delivery firm. And they taught him to drive, and suddenly he had this skill and everything. And there was this whole world, this whole fictional world, this whole character's life that we had developed. The film is set in 1950. All the work we did for the first 6 months was up to the beginning of the war. And then he had a very interesting war because he went out to Caen shortly after D-Day and was working as a driver. This whole history, this whole thing. And then eventually we drop anchor in 1950 in this family. He's married to Vera Drake. And one day they come to arrest her. And she's an honest woman. He can't understand what's happening. It turns out that she was providing abortions for girls who got themselves into trouble. Not for money, but to help people out. And so it wasn't like, normally when you read a scene, you're trying to fill in all the background bits, all the subtextual things, all the things you nearly said and didn't, or did say and shouldn't have, and all that stuff to make it real. But when I was playing Stanley Drake, I knew everything. I knew everything about the man. I knew how he felt. I knew what he'd wished he'd done, and all those things. And so it's a revelation. And of course, when you come to film it, it's easy. It's easy. You know the man backwards. And you've done these improvisations that have taken on sort of quasi-reality, and then it goes away and gets scripted, and then you film it. And so it's as detailed as it can get. And working with Mike from the beginning, from the 70s up till the present day, it did change the way I thought about myself as an actor. You stand at a bus stop, and there are all these different characters. They all look different. They all move differently. They all scratch their heads in a different way. And you start to think, actually, I could do a version of any of them if I do the correct work, if I take it seriously enough. So it's not just showing off acting, it's actually trying to get to the essence of somebody. And you do that by investigating their past. And, there are 4 key questions. Who are they? Where are they from? What are they like? And how did they get to be like that? And if you can answer those questions and fill in all the gaps, then you're in with a chance of coming up with something that's compelling.
Well, let's see something compelling, because we've got 2 clips from Vera Drake. Obviously, it was a big moment for you in your career. The first clip we'll show is actually with a friend from the Barn Theatre, Adrian Scarborough, who obviously was our debutante for the Barn Theatre Presents some years ago, and he played your brother.
He did.
So the scene we're about to see now is Stanley Drake being played by Phil and Frank, and Stan is revealing some news to Frank about his daughter Ethel. I think that's just a pure example of, we've seen you in one thing, but playing Smallweed as like this just gruesome man. And in fact, when we were going through the clips and when I was going through them afterwards, I said, you said that you don't play many, romantic leads or anything, but this is probably the closest we've got, and it's such a lovely character as well.
Yeah, I'm famous for playing psychopaths and nutcases. Everybody asks me, they say, why do you play baddies all the time? I said, well, I don't play baddies all the time, but I do a good line in the nutcases.
How did the phone call from Mike, because obviously you've had a great relationship with Mike over the years, but the first time he wrote things in the 70s, now we're in the noughties, and
yeah, he rings me up, he says, do you want to be in my new film? And I say, yeah, all right. And he won't tell me anything about it. I mean, we knew it was going to be set in the 50s, that's all we knew. But I didn't find out that it was a film about an abortionist until I found out, he found out in an improvisation when they came to arrest him. And we'd been working for 6-7 months by then. I had no idea that was what was on his mind. But that's the thing, he calls it the Official Secrets Act. Nobody knows what anyone else is doing until they find out in character. It's essential that you're sort of working in the dark like that.
And of course your wife is, Vera Drake, is played by the incredible Imelda Staunton.
Yeah.
Which, Imelda, I feel like when Imelda's been on the scene, she's always been fantastic. But in this, I watched it, I've seen it before, but watching it again with doing this work, it really is, it's incredible the work she does on this.
Yeah, it's a wonderful performance, and she won a BAFTA and various other awards, and was nominated for an Oscar. Well deserved.
And what is it like working with somebody like Imelda, especially in a role which is so big for you as well?
Well, because we've done all this work, we've gone through a courtship and this history, over the years. It was just Vera, his missus. So, you're not really aware. You're not really sort of judging the work objectively, and not until you see the film, and then you go, "Oh, this is very good," and it's a sort of shock having done all that stuff. You know these people so intimately, and you know all the bits of their lives that aren't on the screen. It's kind of weird when you see the film and see it sort of cut down and presented and with music on it and all that. It's extraordinary, and I think Mike is a real original. He makes one of those rare filmmakers who makes films about real life. About real people and real. I'm fed up with films about people who can fly, can save the world, and Ant-Man and this man, Beetle Man. I like films about real people, about real life, and the struggles that we all have, having a life. I think there's drama there, and it's as interesting as a man who can punch through an aeroplane window or something.
I guess there's no better example of, say that reality in your work and Mike's work than the clip we're about to see, which is you and Imelda at the end, or Vera rather, at the end of a very long day, that moment of peace. Obviously, come from this working class background, not many moments of peace. But the clip we're going to see is you sharing this intimate moment together, and Stan realising really how lucky he is.
Yeah, and this is just before they come to arrest her.
We can't hide from the fact that Imelda had great critical success with that film, but so did you. You won awards for that film.
I did, yes. I won a BIFA, a British Independent Film Award for the Best Actor, and a Critics Circle for Best Supporting Actor for the same part. And San Diego and various gongs came my way. It was very gratifying and very thrilling.
What's the awards circus like?
Well, it's the BAFTA night was something else. You go to a hotel, you're all dressed up in your finery and all that. And they give you this hamper full of goodies. You go through it. Ooh, look, it's a mobile phone. and somebody gave Oswald Boateng gave me a suit. So it's a thrill, Some Nicky something cut my hair, try and make the best of it. But then you go and they drive you into Leicester Square. There's all these people shouting and all that. And it's the strangest thing. This is a film about this working class family in the 50s. And suddenly everyone's going, woo, at you. It seems sort of incongruous somehow. And I felt sort of detached from it. Like it wasn't really happening to me. It was sort of strange. And, my wife was there and we had champagne and we went into the cinema. And they opened the thing and they read someone else's name out. It was Goldie Hawn who was reading it out. And I didn't hear her. She said, and the winner is... I said, my wife said, no, stay there. Clive Owen won it. I went, oh, right. And then we have to go like that because there's someone with a camera in your face. So it's not as much fun as you think. But, it's show business and it was a thrill. And we had our few moments and all that. But, it's the work that matters, not the awards. But I won't pretend it wasn't exciting. Of course it was. And it was a great night out.
It's crazy. I mean, that was some 12 years ago.
Yes.
Which seems like nothing. And you're coming into now at a time where a lot of your work is, obviously you're doing this thing with Sky Atlantic, but you obviously involved currently with Poldark and stuff like Sherlock, which you did in the last sort of couple of years. Yeah, you're sort of coming full circle. You're doing big cult things again, which people love. And the amount of conventions and stuff you must go to.
Yes, go to a few. Well, it's sort of weird that because, I was in the first episode of Sherlock, and it was just an idea for a detective show. I had no idea, and nor did they, nor did anyone, that it was going to turn into this sort of cult. It's huge in China. Billions of Chinese are watching it. I get fan letters from China. And I was on the M1 and I was playing a mad serial killer. I love you in Sherlock. It's strange, but we had no idea. Like we had no idea that Quadrophenia was going to turn into a cult. So I was just a bit lucky being in the right place at the right time, getting the right part. It's interesting with Sherlock because we did it twice. We shot a pilot. It was a 60-minute pilot, and the BBC looked at it and said, "It's great, but we want it to be 90 minutes. We want it to be longer." So we had to go back and do it again, shoot the whole thing again. And the first one was just binned, just wasted. About £500,000 gone west.
Well, let's show the clip from Sherlock. So the first series, the first anybody's seen in this of Benedict Cumberbatch and Sherlock and everything.
Yes, this was the original pilot. This was the very first one they made.
And the scene which we could have showed, it could have been like 10, 15 minutes. The whole scene is in itself incredible. We've picked this little part, and it's you need a bit of context, so bear with. So you've got Jeff, the taxi driver, who Phil plays. And obviously you've got Benedict Cumberbatch playing Sherlock. And the idea, the game is, which you set, is that they've got two pills. And one has to swallow one has to swallow the other, but one of them is poisonous. So one of them is undoubtedly going to die. But if Benedict or Sherlock doesn't choose, Jeff's going to shoot him. And it's as simple as that. It's very high intensity.
Little game he plays,
Very good. Very good.
It was a great part, Jeff. When they first sent it to me, my agent said, "Oh, they're sending you a new Sherlock thing." She said, "It's the part of the cab driver." I thought, well, hasn't he got a name? And I'm leafing through looking for the cab, and there's one bit earlier where he gets into a cab, and I thought, well, that can't be it. He just says, "Where do you want to go?" They can't. And then it got to the last bit, the last final scene, and there was this wonderful scene between Sherlock and this mad cabbie. And he's been killing people by forcing them to take these pills. And he does the same to Sherlock. But what's interesting is that the great detective, with all these powers of deduction, he doesn't catch Jeff. Jeff turns up and says, "I did it, and now I'm going to do it to you." So it's a sort of bit of a departure for the great detective.
Do you know which Conan Doyle?
It was originally based on A Study in Pink, but it was quite a long way from the original.
We are actually, that's a very good point made there. Phil will take some questions. You can have your chance of sitting in this seat towards... we've got about sort of 10-15 minutes of my evening with Phil. And then Phil will be open to questions from you guys as well. So that's where you choose the better questions, which I haven't already pitched. So Benedict Cumberbatch, obviously he's now gone into this massive superstar.
Yes.
And you've worked with a lot of actors who, as much as yourself, who have got big acclaim. Is there anything different from working with somebody like Benedict or like Imelda, which you don't see in other actors? Or what is that chemistry like when you work with such a big star?
Well, you mustn't let it affect you. You can't work with someone if you're starstruck, I've seen it happen. I've seen actors. When I was directing, I did one of the prime suspects, and there was one of the actors who was working with Helen. And he was fine when we did the audition and all that. And as soon as he got on set, he went all kind of odd. And he was waving a knife like that. I was like, what's the matter with him? And of course he was starstruck, So it's no use. It's just you playing your part next to this other actor. I worked with Judi Dench on Notes on a Scandal. And
I watched it.
and it's just you're just working with another actor. She's brilliant, but that just means she listens very carefully to what you do, and you have to listen very carefully to what she does, and you have to react and respond to each other. So the best thing about if you're working with someone who's a big star is just to forget it and get on with the job, because nobody will thank you for you see those American films, some of them where there's a guy walking along and everyone else is sort of walking sideways like that because they're the star. It's no good. It spoils the scene. It gets in the way. So, however much you might admire someone you're working with, be it Tony Hopkins or Judi Dench or whoever, you've got to forget it and just get on with the job. And, don't be scared. And don't be belittled by someone else's talent or success. It's no use.
It's obviously natural now at the time of your career where you are the star on set, and that's probably no little more than Poldark, which obviously we're in our second series of now, where a lot of that cast must be looking up to you. How does that feel when you go into a new series?
Well,
like
I don't know that they are really. I mean, they've got bigger parts than me, and they're all young and beautiful, and they're all over the front of the Radio Times. And I'm at the back going, staggering around. So, people sometimes have a nice, respect because I've been at it a long time and all that. But I don't really notice it, and I don't think, if I see it, I do my best to make someone as relaxed as they possibly can by joshing about a bit and letting them know that I'm just the same as them and just an actor getting on with it. But I don't really notice that. Certainly not on Poldark, anyway. They barely speak to me.
Well, let's see a clip from Poldark, because obviously it's in the minds of a lot of people. We've actually picked up a clip from the current series last week. It's not the Sundays we just had, last week's one. No, don't worry. I purposefully didn't put Sundays
I'm going to spoil it for everyone afterwards and tell you all what happens.
So you don't get your shirt off.
So I begged them to let me take my shirt off. They wouldn't have it. They said, Aidan said no. He doesn't want you. He doesn't want to be standing next to you.
Just wear the nightdress.
And I'd done all that in the gym for months, and he got all that. I was scything away beside him, but with the shirt on. But it was fear that kept it on.
So in this scene, obviously those of you familiar with Poldark, Ross, who's the master of Judd, who Phil plays, is in a bit of trouble, and Judd gets a little bit of money, blackmail essentially, into putting evidence against him. And this scene is Judd trying to give evidence against his master. Very good.
Great fun playing someone who's drunk all of the time. I've been researching it for years.
Do you watch them in real time when they go live?
Sometimes I do. I mean, I haven't seen Poldark. I was in France last Sunday, so I missed it. I'll probably have a look. I don't know, interestingly, that you learn very much from watching yourself. One of the things I always avoid is rehearsing with myself in front of a mirror. It's you think, well, I don't like it when my nose does that thing, and so you get kind of concerned with things that shouldn't concern you, and I think sometimes if you watch yourself too closely, you can get concerned with in the same way as looking in the mirror. So there are some things I studiously avoid, and some things I look forward to see how it turned out. But I don't watch everything I do, and I don't watch it often. I'm not one of those people who draws the curtains and sort of gets the DVDs. There's me in 1980. I don't do that very often.
This Poldox is a really good example, and also the Riviera film you're doing now, where you have to move your life to a new town or in a new country for months at a time.
Yes.
What is that like?
Well, it's hard. It's hard. I'm a very happily married man. I have a 14-year-old daughter, and I don't like staying away from home very much. Last year, I was in Puerto Rico for 3.5 months. And it's miserable living in a hotel. Even in people say, "You're in Puerto Rico, you lucky sod," but it's not that simple. I don't like being away very much. And when I was younger, it was less of a problem, and I took to it more easily. But now, I like being at home, and it is something of a problem. It's not so bad for Riviera because I go out to Nice for a few days and I can come back because it's only a couple of hours on the plane. Getting back from Puerto Rico is a very, very long and expensive process, so I had to stay out there. But it's being an actor is all I ever wanted to do, and I am really, really happy when I'm working, and I love it. And so, one of the downsides is that you spend a lot of time hanging around in hotel rooms, but that's the swings and roundabouts of it. So,
what's next for you? Obviously, you're filming out in France, but still life in the old dog. What do you want to do? Is there anything that you get to accomplish which you'd like to do?
I don't know. I haven't done very much theatre over the last few years. I did a play earlier this year at Chichester, a very good play called First Light, about the First World War, about deserters during the First World War. We might do that again sometime in London. So maybe I'll go back into the theatre. I get offered quite a lot of theatre, but it's difficult for me because it's a long commitment, usually. But I'm on Riviera till February, and something might come up. Maybe I'll put pen to paper, and maybe I'll write something. I've written a few things over the years, so I might have another go at that.
Any more directing?
Well, possibly. I mean, I sort of gave up directing about 12 years ago, with the exception of our film that we made, Midnight of My Life, that Elliot was in. I made a number of films, one that I'd written myself, and a feature film called ID, another one called Hold Back the Night, and some television, a series called Real Women, Prime Suspect 5, which won an Emmy. And then I was finding it very difficult to judge the two careers, having a director's career and an acting career. It was very difficult to juggle them. And so I sort of went back to acting full-time and put the directing thing on the back burner. But there may be one more project in me yet before I finally hang up me tui, as they say.
Well, we'll set you on one more task this evening, which would be to address the lovely lot who have spent their evening coming down here this evening.
Yes.
If anybody does have any questions that have been dying for either me to ask or you want to ask, do raise your hand.
Yes.
Is there a book coming out about you?
Well, no, is the answer. No. But I may write one myself. And I've been toying with the idea, and I've put some notes in a notebook, and I think I would like to write something just so people know who I am, who I actually am, not all those guys up there, and for my children too, because they don't really know where I came from, and I'm an older parent. I had my kids quite late. and I'm a very different beast to the kid I was when I was 16. And so I think whether anyone will publish it, or if they do, whether anyone will buy it, it remains to be seen. But I might have a go.
Yeah, should do.
Lovely. Anyway. Yes.
Are there any parts that you've been offered or that you haven't taken and then later regretted that you didn't?
Yeah, a couple. Yeah, I have to admit. I've never done a Shakespeare play professionally. I've been offered. I was offered The Fool in Lear some years ago, and I toyed with it and then ran away. I think I maybe should have done it. And years ago, I was offered Hotspur, and I didn't do that either. I had another 2 offers, and you can't do everything. But in the main, I don't regret. I don't have very many regrets. There's a couple of things I let go that maybe I shouldn't have. But there's always been something else. I've been very, very blessed. I'm touching wood as I say it, because I've always worked. And it's really, really tough these days for actors to carry on. And people say, well, what's your ambition? And I say, just more of the same, really. Just give me another job and an interesting character to play, an interesting scene to play in the morning, and I'm a happy man.
Do you think the industry has changed much?
Oh, it's
since
changed
you started
enormously.
out?
I mean, when I was setting out, working around the fringe theatres of London, there were Soho, Polly and the Bush and all those places, they were doing 16 productions a year.
Yeah.
These plays, and they'd bung them on for a fortnight. And so there were parts, there was a ticking over. And now they do maybe 4 plays a year. So there's not the volume of work done. And everything's much more precious now. They take less risks. Gotcha was a play no one really quite knew whether it would work.
Yeah.
And they put it on and we polished it up in rehearsals and it turned into this gem. But nowadays, they're thinking, can we do 2 working class plays in the same season? I don't know. And so it has changed, and the door was always only just ajar, and now it's almost closed for a lot of kids coming out of drama school. I feel for them. It's hard.
I guess blowing the trumpet at the barn, but what do you think of our gaff? Because this place was built, I guess, for our junior groups. They've got an amazing facility here to be able to give it a real good go.
Well, it's great. One of the things about a lot of art forms, if you want to paint, you can paint. No one can stop you. If you want to draw, you can draw. If you want to be an actor, it's more complicated. You have to have this thing behind you. So, you have to have a director and a script and a place. And so somewhere like this is fantastic. And I'm really pleased for you all that you've got it. And keep working in it, make it work.
Has anyone else got any other questions? Yeah.
Can I ask process? You turn up on set and you've got all your lines in your nut. How do you do that? What's your process of getting? You get the script. You obviously need to look into character, but how do you get your lines where they need to be so you turn up on set?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I gave a talk a couple of years ago to mostly drama students and young actors, how to prepare for a day's filming. You've got a day and you've got this little part, you're playing someone in a chemist, you serve them and all that. And how do you prepare? And you can go and learn your lines, and you're thinking, maybe I'll play it like this, and maybe I'll play it. And I think you have to be sort of pragmatic, and you have to keep an open mind. Because if you decide you're going to do it this way and you're going to put the glass down on that line, and this and that, and you get there and the director wants you to be moving around, and it's all different. And so learning the lines is not really a problem. Someday, doing Riviera the other day, I had almost a page. I had to go over and over and over it again. Years ago it used to be easy. It's not so easy anymore. Because you learn them and you wake up the next morning and you open the box and it's empty. They've all gone. I knew it. But that's just graft, But working out.
Literally what you do, you sit and you go
You go through it and 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 through it. And then when you get on set, you relax. Because if you're worried about forgetting the lines, you're going to forget the lines. So you just trust that you know it. It's easier when it's a conversation. It's less easy when it's a speech. But in terms of how you're going to play it and what you're going to do, I tend to make up my mind on the day with the director there. So I say, can I actually be sitting for this, or can I be standing for this? Because they may have lined up a way of shooting it that won't fit. So you have to keep an open mind. And if you get there and they've got a crane shot, there's nothing you can do. They're going to use the crane shot. If you don't want to come out of the building, they can't shoot you. So you have to be sensible.
Wonderful. Anyone else got a question? Yes, at the back there. Yeah.
You said frivolously that you'd spent time in the gym to do a workout.
God, do you think I look like this without work?
Have you ever had to do anything like eat so many calories or learn a skill that was really difficult that you needed to do to become the character you
Well,
were?
Judd Painter drinks a lot, so I had to. It was terrible, but I had to research that assiduously. No, not really. I mean, when I was younger, I used to keep fit and go jogging and played a lot of football. I play golf now, as Elliot knows. And it's probably too late for me to learn any serious skills like that. And you're not going to catch me in a gymnasium. Sorry, but that would be a step too far. But if there's something I need to do, then I'll do my best to learn how to do it. Otherwise, I have to get a stuntman who looks like me.
He's a very good golfer as well. Yes, we'll take a question here, because we'll go to yours as well, yeah.
You mentioned how different your parents' life was
Yes.
from the one you've taken. How did they take you, or how have they taken?
That's a lovely question. They're both gone now, sadly. And it was really very difficult for them when I was growing up wanting to be an actor. They had no idea how to help. And I think they were both scared for me that I was going to be terribly disappointed. I think there was a time when my dad felt it was just a scam, to get out of having to go to work. And he had a point. But my mum was always a champion of me and believed in me. And so, of course, when I started working and it started to work, they were both thrilled and delighted. But my dad was always a bit sceptical. And he came to see Gotcha. I believe we're going to see a clip of that later. And I met them afterwards and we went round to the pub. And my dad was rather a taciturn man and not given to great shows of emotion, but he had tears in his eyes. And he said, "All right, you can call yourself an actor now." And he gave me a hug. So it was enormously gratifying.
Lovely. Yes.
Is there anybody that you haven't worked with that you'd like to work?
Oh, lots of people. Lots of actors that I haven't worked with that I'd like to. But for me, it's not really working with other people. I don't mean to be egotistical. It's about the part. So there are some characters that I just find intriguing. And I think, I'd love to have a go at him, I'd love to do my version of this character. And of course, if you find that someone wonderful who you much admire is playing opposite you, then it's a bonus. But for me, it's the role itself and not the thrill of working. There are some directors I'd like to work with that I haven't had a go at yet. But that's an honest answer to your question, I think.
Cool. Let's just take a couple more. Tim, yeah, go on.
You mentioned Riviera a few times.
Yes.
And you're obviously doing it for quite a long time. What is it?
It's a series for Sky Atlantic, 10 parts, set in the south of France. Terrible. And it's about Julia Stiles, the American actress. She plays a woman who's an art curator for a billionaire, and she marries him. And they have a very happy relationship until he gets blown up on an oligarch's yacht. And then there's this enormous estate to split up. And I play an Interpol cop who doesn't really like very, very rich people and thinks they should pay their taxes. And he's investigating them for laundering money from these sales of these very expensive artworks. So it's a sort of glamorous mix of that kind of thing and with the wonderful south of France. It's beautiful.
Wonderful. And we'll take our final one just here. Thank
It's
you.
a bit of a supplementary question from the one John asked earlier
Yeah.
about preparation, but when you were saying about that Dickens novel, or the Dickens
Smallwood,
Bleak House,
yes.
yeah, and you haven't read the book, but do you sort of see in your mind's eye when you're preparing, do you see a real life person that you're trying to be, or someone that you've seen on a bus or whatever? You know, do you try and base it on something in real life?
Sometimes I do. I mean, with the Dickens, of course, I had the character in the novel to look at, and there were some sketches of him as well, sort of spidery man, all that, and sometimes not. But the interesting thing about Smallweed was it was such a vivid character, and you know, sometimes when I'm playing a character, I've got a little room at the top of the house upstairs, and I go in there, I close the door, and I sort of be him for half an hour. I'm not saying anything or looking at so anyone can see, just to feel what it's like, you know, wearing the shoes. Maybe walk down. Sometimes I walk down to the off license, you know, buy a can of beer, pretending to be somebody else. And of course, you can't do that with Smallweed. He can't walk, and if he could, he'd be, you know. And so I'd made all these sort of. I had all these ideas about how he should be, but I hadn't actually sort of done it. And then we came to do the read-through, and there's this table full of all these distinguished actors, you know. And I'm turning the page, I think it's my bit in a minute, you know. And I started to read, and this voice came out, Mr. Tulkinghorn. And I hadn't done that before. It was like a surprise to me. He sort of plopped out fully formed. I thought, oh, thank God for that. It'll be all right. Because I didn't quite know what I was going to do, and so, you know, as an actor, sometimes you hold your nose and jump, and just have a go and see how it falls.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for your questions. Right, we're almost out of time. We're going to show one more clip, which Phil alludes to, is from your big break, essentially, which was Gotcha. I was familiar with the play. You cannot get the DVD now for love nor money. In fact, you've got a lovely story that your wife wrote to the BBC soon after you were married to get the clipping and to get the movie.
She pretended it was for educational purposes. She lied through her teeth, but she got me a DVD.
And it's truly wonderful. So we've saved it for this evening because your career has been so, 40 years, but it all started at this one point. And like you alluded to earlier, when we were looking through the clips, this one I think touched us both. This comes at the very, very end, or near to the end of the play, the film Gotcha. And like you were saying earlier, well, why don't you set it up, Phil, and we can end the evening like that.
Well, this is a kid who believes he has no future, and he believes it's wrong. That there's a terrible injustice has been done to him, and it was supposed to be different, wasn't it? This new comprehensive education system, and just play it; it speaks for itself.
And that is that. Thank you so much for coming out. And thank you, Phil, for coming down. I mean, you were so generous with your time and your stories. The evening flew by. I had to keep an eye on my clock. We could have been here all evening. So thank you very much, Phil. Thank you everyone who's worked on this. Got Tim filming at the back, John up in the box, Coral who invited me down, Rob who's been stage managing, the guys at the bar, you guys, my brother and sister who did the film, bloody everyone. So thank you so much. But please, can we put one more hand together as the Barn Theatre presents Mr. Phil Day. Thank you very much. As we're live, so we will see you in the bar. Give us a couple of moments.